We are back, and today we're going to be discussing the entire schedule and the expectations of the Ohio State Buckeyes football schedule. I want to get this right off the bat and say that last year cannot happen again. I know for 99% of college football teams, a 10-2 record, improving to 11-2 after a win over Utah in the Rose Bowl would be great and fine and dandy, and give the coach a lifetime extension. Not at Ohio State. Ohio State has 3 goals at the beginning of every season, and that is to beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship, and compete for a national championship. None of those 3 things happened. They lose to Michigan. They don't even make the Big Ten championship, and they obviously don't make the college football playoff either because of that. So I view last season as kind of an abject failure from the Buckeyes, which you're going to have seasons like that every now and again. They're transitioning quarterbacks. Their defense was awful. I think it was like in the low 50s, which is unacceptable for an Ohio State Buckeye defense. You really noticed it on the run. They could not defend the run against good teams. They weren't that great in pass coverage either, but the holes in the defense were really glaring when teams started to run the ball on you and when they could, physically push you around. Oregon comes to mind last year. Michigan definitely too. The 2 losses, they really highlighted how bad that run defense was. But that cannot happen again. If Ohio State goes, they go 10-2 and they play in some other New Year's Six bowl game that isn't the college football playoffs, even if they win it and they lose to Michigan and they're not even in the conversation for the playoffs or the Big Ten championship, then Ryan Day has to be on the hot seat. I'm not saying fire him after this year if that happens, but we have to start putting him on the hot seat and wondering if Ryan Day is the coach that moves the Buckeyes forward if that happens again, which I don't think it will, but I know it's a possibility because I didn't think last year would go down the way it did, and it did. All right, so now let's get into the schedule with the big one starting on September 3rd at home against Notre Dame. This is the big out-of-conference Power 5 matchup, although with the way that the college football landscape is changing, I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years maybe this becomes an in-conference matchup because Notre Dame's independent right now, but I wonder if it becomes too lucrative to join one of these conferences that's going to keep adding teams and keep getting more money, if that's going to be too lucrative for Notre Dame to pass up. But that's in the future. We're going to talk about the now. This is going to be the tone setter for the entire season, kind of like what Oregon was last year. The season after the Oregon game, you kind of knew it wasn't going to be as good as you think it could have been at the beginning of the season. And I think this game will play a very similar effect. If the defense is bad and they run all over you and, they win by, maybe it's a 1-score game, but it's never really that close like it was against Oregon last year, then that's going to, put a sour mood for the Ohio State fan base, myself included, for the season. And I don't think that's wrongly, that's a wrong opinion to have. And the only way the Buckeyes are going to be able to really qualm those doubts is just to win the rest of their games or whatever. But I think it would be better if we just avoided all of that and just, Ohio State just beats Notre Dame convincingly at home in the first game of the season, in which Marcus Freeman said some stuff about how the Buckeyes don't even care about academics, players don't even go to class, and that's very so different at Notre Dame, which might be kind of true to an extent, but you had people who played for Ohio State saying I did go to classes, actually, I did do this. So Marcus Freeman obviously trying to hype up the Notre Dame fans, but in doing so he gives the Buckeyes bulletin board material, which you don't need to do. Again, Ohio State needs to start this season on a high note. The team did not trademark the term "the" to go 10-2 and play in a consolation bowl against the dead conference representative. That change starts with beating Notre Dame in the first game of the season. Then you have September 10th against Arkansas State. That should be a blowout. That I feel the same about September 17th at home against Toledo. That should also be a blowout. If the defense looks even mediocre against these teams, if these aren't complete blowouts from the get-go, if Ohio State has to pull away in the second half and it's close after halftime, then that's like ring the alarm bells, panic time for me at least. I know there's the win is a win crowd, but if you're still competitive with Arkansas State and Toledo and it's like the second quarter or the third quarter, then I start to get a little nervous. Then you have our first conference game, September 24th at home against Wisconsin. This is a potential Big Ten championship preview. If you look at all the media reports and the odds makers, that Ohio State and Wisconsin are the most likely to match up in the Big Ten championship. This game, how I feel about it is going to largely depend on what Ohio State does against Notre Dame. If Ohio State goes out there and takes care of business and beats Notre Dame handedly, then I think I'm not worried about this Wisconsin game as much. But if that Notre Dame Ohio State game is close, or if Notre Dame wins and the only winning football Ohio State plays is against a group of 5 schools, then I'm a little bit antsy about this Wisconsin game. Graham Mertz is still there. He's still slinging the rock, so he is a guy that's been around for a while. And I still think the Buckeyes have a much better roster on paper than just about anybody in this conference and most teams in the nation. But, again, if they look shaky against Notre Dame and they haven't really played much tough competition since, then this might be a problem for the Buckeyes. Then you have October 1st against Rutgers. I also expect this to be a blowout like Toledo and Arkansas State. I understand that Rutgers may not be as bad as those teams per se. They might not be as objectively terrible as they have been in years past, but it is still Rutgers. I still expect this game to be a blowout. On October 8th, we have our first road game at Michigan State. Michigan State losing Kenneth Walker III is going to be huge for them, but Peyton Thorne is still there. He's somebody you have to pay attention to, and if you're not focused, he could, kill you by 1,000 cuts. But again, this roster on paper is much better than Michigan State's. That hasn't always mattered. We know it has happened before with seasons that look good, and Michigan State ruins that. But just do what you did last year when they did have Kenneth Walker, and it didn't even matter. It was still a blowout. Just do what you did last year, and they'll be fine. But if not, then I hope this isn't even a game. But if they make it a game, then I hope Ohio State wins. And it is, it's going to be their first road game. Maybe they have trouble adjusting to the fans actually not rooting for them and being loud when they're on offense or whatever. But the expectation for that game is to win and win pretty handily by probably at least, I like a double-digit victory there. That's the expectation. But that is a case where a win's a win. You'll take a win on the road against Michigan State any way you can. But if they look not good doing it, then that is a bit of a, you're going to raise your eyebrows a little bit. And if they lose, then it's like, panic time for the season. Then we have a bye week to let Ohio State rest from having to play an actual game on the road, and then back to friendly confines on October 22nd against Iowa in Ohio Stadium. Should be an easy win, maybe not quite a blowout of epic proportions like I'm expecting for some other of these games, but Ohio State should beat Iowa pretty easily. I know that Iowa's done some weird stuff to Ohio State in the past, but that was when Ohio State was on the road, and Iowa has some weird magic they got going on there where they seem to always get a victory that they shouldn't somewhere in Iowa, but it's at home, it's in Columbus, should be pretty controlled there, should be a pretty easy win. Although that Iowa game does have trap game potential because the next week on October 29th, they go into Penn State at Happy Valley, really for the first big crowd. It's going to be the whiteout night game. The first big crowd really at Happy Valley since before COVID. In 2019, it was in Columbus, and then in 2020, there couldn't be fans there, and that was when it was at Penn State. 2021, it was at Columbus. And now in 2022, again, first time since COVID that there's going to be a big crowd there that's going to be wild and crazy and trying to give the Buckeyes everything they can handle. Hopefully, Penn State has had a couple of downish years for them, so hopefully that momentum continues and that, the crowd can be as intimidating as they want, but the product on the field won't come anywhere close to matching it. And I hope that's what the outcome is. Hopefully they're not too rattled by having to play their second road game in 3 games. And hopefully that, the Buckeyes take care of business there. This is another game where you like to see the Buckeyes, win by however many they're supposed to, double digits or whatever. But if you have to eke out a win, then you have to eke out a win. Sometimes you got to do that against a team with a crazy crowd and just, nothing but adrenaline on their side. And if Ohio State can come out with a win, that's going to be the expectation. That'll be the good thing. And a loss here could really derail the season. Then things calm down a bit. You have November 5th at Northwestern. Again, that should be a pretty easy victory. Although this could be a Big Ten championship preview because Northwestern has had a history of somehow getting out of the West and sneaking in there. I guess I would take another boring Big Ten championship win probably over not being in it and losing to Michigan. So if Northwestern has to be the team that we play in the West, then hopefully the Buckeyes would already have taken care of business and haven't accrued like a loss or two or a bad loss where they have to kind of convince the committee that they deserve a spot. If, again, doing that against Northwestern isn't good for them, really. We saw how it worked out in 2019 with Dwayne Haskins, or 2018 with Dwayne Haskins, sorry. Then you have November 12th at home against Indiana. And unless the Jack Tuttle train leaves the station, this game should be still pretty easy. This is not the Indiana that gave Ohio State a fits in 2020 with a huge second half comeback. In 2020, if that game goes 5 quarters, maybe Ohio State loses that game, but it doesn't. It ends in 4. But this year, Penix isn't there anymore to sling the rock, run all over the place. Hopefully the Buckeye defense will have, at least if they're not completely a top 10 defense, hopefully they will have at least improved and gelled over the course of the season. By now, it should be pretty locked down against an Indiana team that isn't necessarily known for having such a prolific offense. And hopefully, Ohio State should just win this game pretty easily. The same goes for November 19th at Maryland. However, this does have trap game potential because it is the game the week before Michigan. So there maybe Ohio State minds kind of stray on to Michigan and Columbus. But if the defense is still shaky and Tua's little brother is good and doing good things in Maryland, then this does have trap game potential, which would be a disaster, obviously. But if Ohio State is focused, if they have their minds right on Maryland, then it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And then you have the big one, November 26th against Michigan at home in Columbus. Hopefully it's a revenge game, and the strategy here is just win. That's all I care about. I don't care if it's by 1 point or by 100 points. Well, I mean, I'd prefer 100 points, but if you have to eke out a victory, then you have to. I don't care what Michigan's record is. I will always be a nervous wreck before this game just because of what happened last year and also just because of just the general... I'm nervous before the game no matter what the records are before it. Michigan obviously lost a lot of talent to the NFL last year. David Ojabo, Aiden Hutchinson. They also lost a lot of their assistant coaches because Jim Harbaugh was going to leave to Minnesota, and then Minnesota said, yeah, we're not going to just hire you. So he went back. So Jim Harbaugh's still there with almost a completely new staff. He had to replenish some of his talent pool. I don't think they have as good of a team as they did last year. I think Ohio State has a better team than they did last year. So hopefully that equates to Ohio State actually winning. I mean, Michigan got their once per decade win. They shouldn't be getting any more. If it happens twice in a row, again, I think that means Ryan Day should be on the hot seat because you have to beat Michigan. You have to. Last year was unacceptable in that regard and many others, but the thing is you have to beat Michigan. You cannot be a coach at Ohio State and consistently have a losing record against Michigan. That's not going to fly. So if he dips into the red against Michigan, Ryan Day, then we're gonna start questioning whether he should be the Buckeyes coach moving forward or not. So that was my schedule preview and my expectations for the Buckeyes this year. I expect them to win every game because they expect themselves to win every game, as they should. They are huge paper favorites. They have a stacked roster like every year. Last year was unacceptable with how it went, and I would like to see it go better this year. If you made it this far, thank you all for watching. If you like this video and would like to see more like it, please feel free to like and subscribe. Let me know what you think about the Buckeye schedule and your expectations for them in the comments down below. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you with the next one.